we're good? You guys could hear me though. Okay. All right. But now every worldview or lifestyle all around the globe is available to all of us in our back pocket. We have all of human cultures and ways of life to choose from how we want to live. Which sounds pretty good, and in many ways it is, except the other people that you do life with might choose a different worldview or lifestyle. Your parents, your best friend from high school, your coworkers, your children. Speaking of children, I don't know if you've put this together, but we have less of them now than we used to. First time in human history, people aren't sure what to do with this. We don't have models for it. Pretty much every wealthy country is having steep declines in birth rates. We don't even know what that means or what it will look like. Then there's AI. Will any of us have jobs in a few years, other than the billionaires? And there's deep fakes. Will we believe any video that we see online? Will we believe anything that we read? You know, in the last couple of years, just in our country, there's been a record number of people who have burned to death in fires, or who have drowned in floods, or who have frozen to death in blizzards. Oh, and then there's, I almost forgot, political divisions, ethnic and racial strife. But this isn't even just the US. If you're a little nerdy like me and you try to pay attention globally, it takes a different regional flavor culturally, but the same thing is happening in East Asia, Middle East, Europe, and South America. Welcome to the hinge point of history. Before I had the opportunity to serve as a faculty member, I was a full-time pastor for a whole bunch of years in eastern Pennsylvania. And one of the challenges but honors of being a minister is you are normally present in people's worst moments. I've been in the room when there's 12 different medical personnel running around and a doctor finally says, "That's enough," and announces that the infant has passed. I've been in the room with a couple when across the table a doctor says, "Your 14-year-old needs to start chemotherapy." I've received a phone call from a woman saying, "Hey, I don't know what to say. She didn't sound like herself. Can you please come over right now to my house?" And I go over and she's like in a daze and shows me a note that her husband left saying he left her for another woman. I've received a phone call from a man hysterical because there is a corpse in his front yard. I've been at a funeral where people are not only crying, but screaming and yelling at each other and fighting at the graveside. Been in some of the worst moments. Now, there's a lot of things I don't know, but there's a couple of things I've learned from these moments. One, you never tell people things are going to be fine or okay, or that they'll get back to normal. Whenever these moments occur, things never get back to the way that they were. But secondly, people need some kind of plan or actions they can take, even if it can't fix everything. In the worst moments, people normally need a mission or some kind of marching orders to feel like there's at least a purpose in the struggle. It helps them to keep going. This morning, we're going to turn to Jesus of Nazareth, of course, on living well in an unpredictable world. In a world where everything is changing and we don't know what's going to happen. What is Jesus' advice to us in living well in this context? And we're going to do this a little differently this morning. Pastor Ryan and I talked about it. So if what we do today works, you're welcome. If not, I told him it wasn't going to. So you can let him know that later. But what I did is I sat down with a passage in the Gospels, one of the biographies of Jesus, spent some time kind of reading through it, meditating through it, and I wrote down what I think are some implications based on what Jesus said for us today in a very unpredictable time. Now, I confess that I believe Jesus has all the truth. I'm less confident always in my interpretation of it, so you may disagree with something I put down, that's fine. But what we're going to do is, in just a moment, I have a handout we're going to pass through, everyone, and you're going to take a moment or two and read through that. Then I'm going to give you a few minutes, kind of like class, where you can turn to people around you what stood out because you agree or disagree or it doesn't make sense or you just find it interesting. And then in a couple of minutes after that, we'll come back together. And if you have a question or a comment, we'll spend a few minutes interacting as a whole group. But before we hand out that sheet, or as we're about to, I'm just going to read this passage. It won't be on the screen. If it helps, maybe close your eyes and just take in these words from Matthew's Gospel, the first book in the New Testament, Matthew chapter 10. It says these 12, these were Jesus's key students. Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Do not get any gold or silver or copper to take with you in your belts. No bag for the journey or extra shirt or sandals or a staff, for the worker is worth his keep. Whatever town or village you enter, search there for some worthy person and stay at their house until you leave. As you enter the home, give it your greeting. If the home is deserving, let your peace rest on it. If it is not, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet. Truly, I tell you, it will be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. people that are sitting by you, or if there's someone around the room that you enjoy their thoughts better, you can get up and move if you want. But take a few minutes and interact with some others besides whoever you're sitting right next to, maybe a group of 4 or 5. What stood out to you? Why? Where do you agree, disagree? Why? Just about one more minute, and we'll come back together as a whole group. About 1 minute. Okay, let's regather as a whole group, please. There's a microphone going around. If you have a question, if you have a comment, if you strongly disagree with something on that sheet, please put your hand up and we'll come around with a mic. Let's spend a few minutes talking all together as a whole group. Questions, comments, disagreements?
So one of the quotes that were standing out to us was on the back page. It was the second one. And just kind of curious what your interpretation would be of the opposite of fragile is something that gains from disorder. Like, what would be some examples of that?
Well, where Talib particularly goes with that is he would say in a culture or an environment where nothing is predictable and everything is changing all the time, the worst thing that you and I can do is have a predetermined, here's what I want to do with my life, here's what I want to do with my career, maybe even my family, here's where I want to live, like having predetermined goals and then trying to wrap a plan around that leads to frustration and pain and disappointment and maybe even some worse problems because the context is always changing. So what Talib suggests that we do in an environment like this is we're basically just kind of experimenting all the time. We just try out little things. And if something seems to be effective, or the Spirit's moving there, or good things happen, we do more of that. Or if something we were planning on seems like it can't work, or it's going poorly, we quickly pivot. So it's a mindset of always, I think his language is, always tinkering, always experimenting and adjusting with what's being effective or bringing good in the world or not, instead of having predetermined plans. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think just when we were reading the opposite of fragile as something that gains from disorder, I mean, my mind was going that fragility is almost that call to lay down your life.
Okay.
Like, that's how I was interpreting it. And that the opposite of fragile is something that gains from disorder.
Yep.
Almost something that is evil that's gaining from chaos.
Oh, okay, yes. That would not be his definition. His would be, because things are ever changing and you're trying new things and adapting, you are learning and gaining wisdom as you go. His definition of fragile is we have predetermined how things should be. And so when they are not, we fall apart.
So regarding the quote by Parker Palmer.
Yes.
So while I take from the back end, like if our bucket is empty, we can't pour into others.
Yeah.
However, it's the self-care is never. It's that never that really hangs on for me because like there is going to be some times where self-care is to me a selfish act. And so it's that never that really stuck with me. So can you speak to that?
Well, I think part of it is probably our definition of self-care. So if I define self-care is what do I need to do to be in a good place personally, to have plenty to give others, to have my soul in the right place, to be growing in virtue or what's good and not being dominated by my bad habits. In that way, self-care is not being selfish. We even see in the New Testament with Jesus, at times he's out healing the masses and the crowds are all around and he leaves. He needs to go be alone. He often goes and prays, or he kind of retreats with his disciples. He's not doing that just because he doesn't care and he just wants to do his own thing. Sometimes in our world right now, we define self-care as just having a me day to do what I want. And that at times can be selfish. Great question. Someone else, comment, thought, question, disagreement.
How does one go about letting their peace rest on a house?
Great question. How I interpret this passage, and so do some others, but maybe not everyone, is basically I'm living a life that I think God would have me to live. And if you affirm that, or you feel like you're a partner in that, or you're encouraging me, then we become closer friends. And we do life together. And I would step towards you. If you're resisting that, or closed, or in opposition, I choose to go the other way. And I think the reason this is really important is particularly in our current world, some of us think for doing what's right or caring about what's right means fighting against those people, whoever those people are, or letting those people know that I'm sure they are wrong. And at least in this passage, Jesus seems to say, if people are open to you in the way you are going, move closer to them. But if people are closed or are pushing back or going in the other direction or don't want to have anything to do with this, don't try to argue with them. Don't try to win. Move on. Find the people who are open. That would be my interpretation.
Yeah, to piggyback off that was kind of my question. It's like at the beginning it says, don't go to the towns that are already basically a safe haven for you, and to challenge yourself in a space that, does have lost sheep. But then to still find those people in that space, it felt kind of like contradictory. And that's kind of where, like, in, like, say, a political environment now, right? Like, I agree, like, the fighting doesn't make sense, but if you surround yourself with people that bring out the best in you, which I did agree, that's kind of like how I interpret it, how do you protect yourself from being ignorant to maybe what is the way that Jesus would rather you be than just your safe space?
Oh, yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think we probably need both. We probably need safe spaces, safe people, where we feel like they're bringing energy and life and growth to us. And yet, we need to stay open to the new things God is doing. As I read this passage at the beginning of Matthew 10, when Jesus says, don't go among the Gentiles or any town of the Samaritans, I think he's saying something like, don't go out and try to change the whole world. Don't try to find the furthest place and go there. Who's right in front of you that is hurting, that's in need? Who's already in your life that you could partner with the Spirit to be a blessing for, to help? And if those people are open and things are happening, lean in more and more. If those people resist, keep moving on. So there is, I think, elements of Jesus' teaching here that is, you need to attend to personal growth And if people are closed, move away from them. If people are open, move towards them. And look for who's right around you that's hurting, that you can partner with God to help. So I think it's both. If that makes sense. Last one right here.
I don't know, I keep going back to that simply move on from them, and I love that because it's just the opposite of the human reaction to say, what's wrong with you? You're wrong, and all of that. But it's so challenging to do, so I was just thinking, like, practically, what helps us graciously let go and move on? Like, how to tangibly, practically do that in a graceful way.
Do you have a suggestion for us?
Take a breath and turn around. But beyond that.
Yeah. No, I think it's so difficult right now, again, because our moment in history and our culture teaches us that if we care about what is good and right, we will fight for that. And in some ways that's true. But there's a difference in fighting for what's good and giving my life towards it, my time, my energy, doing all that I can to be a blessing and a partner with God to others. And it's another thing to make sure that people that I'm convinced are wrong, that I'm letting them know that